Wake up.
Wake up, Africa, your time has come. Open up your eyes and see the sun. Open up your spirit.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, Africa.
Hello and welcome to Africa Watch on the Dr. Mumbi Show. My name is Dr. Mumbi Saraki. How you doing? How's everything going? Thanks to every single person that has subscribed to the channel. Thanks to every single person that supports us through our PayPal account and all the members of our Patreon. We appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to hit that notification button if you haven't already so that you can know every single time we upload an episode. Now, so much has been happening. A lot of you guys have reached out to me to talk about Trump's latest strategy for Africa. Now, he's calling the strategy Prosper Africa. And the first thing they were saying is that, they've come out with their strategy faster than Obama came out with his strategy. Obama, it actually took him about 3 years into his presidency before he outlined his strategy for Africa, whereas Trump has done it in 2 years. So he's really, how he loves those, he loves to just pat his own back. But he was saying that. But basically, he's calling the strategy Prosper Africa, and it's basically a plan that he launched to counter what he calls the predatory practices of China and Russia, which deliberately and aggressively target American investments in Africa. That's what he wanted to say. So it has nothing to do with us. And what we're seeing is a re-scramble for Africa. The re-scramble for Africa has really, really gone into high gear. China has been doing their thing. They've been really investing a lot, financially and infrastructure-wise. I've talked so much about China on this channel. They're also now moving their military into Africa in a very significant way. We also saw Russia moving into the Central African Republic. There's rumors and allegations that they gave a lot of weapons, because they're one of the biggest traders in small arms. And so they give a lot of weapons to the government in the Central African Republic. They've also been accused of trying to, put their tentacles in different African nations. So now, now America has also countered. And what they said is they were going to start to be more selective and more careful in choosing their African partners. Trump accused China of bribing different African leaders. He also accused them of opaque agreements and strategic use of debt to hold states in Africa hostage to Beijing wishes and demands. And they, so he was totally having, it was almost like a marketing thing, saying that, America would be different. So he also came out and accused Russia of seeking to increase influence in the region through corrupt economic dealings. And he said that Russia and China was stunting Africa's economic growth. Let's not forget that Africa has at least out of the top 10, the majority of nations with the fastest growing economies are actually in Africa. So don't believe the hype that we're doing so badly, because we're not. But we have to also make sure that ultimately this benefits us. Let's also not forget that Africa has trillions of dollars of natural resources. Now, so this new Prosper strategy, it basically encourages African leaders to choose high quality, transparent, inclusive and sustainable foreign investment projects, including those from the U.S. So the U.S. also said they were going to evaluate their support for the UN peacekeeping missions in Africa, as well as aid to troublesome nations. South Sudan was mentioned as one of the troublesome nations. And they also said that the U.S. will be cutting its AFRICOM, which is basically its military presence, or its Africa Command, the military presence in Africa, by 10% over the next couple of years. Let's not forget that the U.S. has a military presence in 53 out of the 54 African nations. And there was, there's a video I did on this actually a while back that talked about how a lot of the diplomats in different embassies across Africa, there's more military experts than there are actual diplomats in a lot of these embassies. And, there's a lot of articles that have come out that say the U.S. is actually running a covert war in Africa against different nations and, against those that threaten their interests. And what shows you, guys, the scramble for Africa is on. And, a lot of people are extremely disturbed because now it's just like, what are we going to do? How will we manage this? We have Russia here, we have China here, we have France there, we have the UK here, and we have the US, all of them just trying to, control and dominate the African nation. It's a total mess. Well, let's also not forget that Trump has called, first of all, he had a name for a country that doesn't even exist. He referred to Zambia as Nambia. Also, his shithole nations, he's never been able to live that down. And there's a comment that he made about Nigeria where he said Nigerians never return to their huts in Nigeria once they land in America. And this was during one of his speeches about immigration. But when I come back, I'll be letting you know why this could actually be a good thing for Africa, having all these people scrambling to build and to give us money and to do all these things. Could it actually work out in our favor? We'll be right back.
Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel.
Welcome back to Africa Watch on the Dr. Mumbi Show. My name is Dr. Mumbi Saraki. What's up, guys? So Trump, prosper Africa. I love the way that, the language is used to deceive our minds. It's never about Africa. It's always about the interests of other nations. But this always tricks us, So we hear this strategy. The U.S. has come up with a strategy, prosper Africa, where they're going to help Africa. It's going to be mutually beneficial and they're going to help Africa to prosper. I mean, no one is going to ever help us to do anything. We must help ourselves. And that's just something we have to come up with. So, that's just something we have to recognize. We can't be waiting for other people to always come and give us ideas. So now this new strategy that Trump has for Africa, the 3 core U.S. interests, and this will just confirm to you what I'm saying. The 3 core U.S. interests are to advance U.S. trade and commercial interests, commercial ties. That's basically it. Countering terrorism. So they're going to be fighting Al-Shabaab and all these others, so which is just basically, that just means military presence. Because, stories for other days, but a lot of these things that we're told about these Al-Shabaabs and these Boko Harams, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that they are actually covert operations by different, security agencies such as the CIA, MI6, etc. I mean, look, come on. Let's just be realistic about it, you guys. And if you're doubting what I'm saying, just look at what happened with Osama bin Laden and how he was, it was proved that he was allegedly a CIA agent for many, many years. So, and the third thing is, of course, prioritization of aid. And what they were saying is now they're actually going to be using their money. So he said they're now going to be selecting more carefully the nations that they partner with. And so what you need to read in this, we're coming for the money and commercial ties. We're going to use our money to now leverage like they've always done. So, if you don't follow what we want you to follow, we'll pull the money out. And we're going to increase our military presence. As much as they say that they're decreasing their military presence, it's all a lie. It's all a mind game. And, what we need to realize is, as much as Trump is accusing China and Russia of stunting economic growth, the chief countries that have stunted the growth of Africa have actually been the former colonizers and the United States. It is long known that the U.S. has played a covert role in the, selection of a lot of presidents across the continent, in maintaining a lot of the presidents. They even say that the former dictator, Mobutu Sese Seko of Congo, was actually a CIA puppet and a CIA agent. So what has happened is a lot of these former colonies have been playing so many dirty games in Africa for decades. And what's happening now is that China and Russia are beating them at their own game. So he's coming and accusing, but he's forgetting that the US and European strings-attached foreign aid is what kept Africa back for decades and stunted the growth and development of our nations. And you just need to read, I've talked about this book so much, but please read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It will explain what I'm saying so perfectly. Also, if we look at the strategic poverty reduction papers of IMF and World Bank, where they forced a lot of African nations, because what happened is they used to give their African nations, like African dictators, money. Then when they wanted more money, they would be like, no, now you have to improve how you're running the government, blah, blah, blah. So they forced a lot of the privatization of the water, of the energy, of the, of the different, the health, of different and public infrastructures. They forced them to privatize in order to get aid under the excuse of, trying to help the countries run better. And what happened is, of course, when they privatized, guess who bought these companies? It's just so pathetic. So for so long, this is what Africa has been dealing with. The U.S. and the Europeans interfering. And that is why a lot of presidents actually now started moving towards China, because also the U.S. used to even come and say, oh, you can't do this with your human rights. I don't know if you saw in Tanzania, just a classic example, right? In Tanzania, Magufuli actually said that, LGBT is not going to be supported. The gay rights agenda is not welcome in Tanzania, and he spoke out against it. The next thing, you saw Denmark, you saw different European countries saying that they were going to pull aid from Tanzania because of human rights abuses, because of not being, of not having equality. And this is what made a lot of African nations shift to China. So, the China no strings debt trap attraction has been just as bad. And this is why I say no one ever has our best interests at heart. China came in, there was so many strings attached that we didn't see. And we saw that now with Zambia, apparently losing the Zambia Broadcasting Corporation, allegedly losing the Zambia International Airport, the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport, although there's been a lot of arguments against that. But what we see is that none of these nations have our interests at heart. They only have their interests at heart. And this is something we just have to accept and just be real about. So one of the things that a lot of African analysts have been saying is that, it looks like our enemies will fight our battles. And, a lot of people had predicted that no way in hell, literally, would the US and Europe sit back and allow China to take over Africa. And what we're seeing now is that it's like these are our enemies. The enemies of our enemies are almost like our friends. Not really our friends, but our enemies are fighting. They're falling all over themselves to give us money. We saw Trump coming up with his own $60 billion international fund, to counter the Chinese fund that, what the Chinese president did at the China summit. I have to wind up now. But, African presidents should now demand the best of the best in the deals, because now there's so many people who want a stake in our nations. And we should have the courage now. African leaders should now have the courage to say no when they want to say no, to reject deals that are not in our favor. And you know what? I was just saying another thing, because now, you know what Trump said? He said, we're not going to beat China at their game, at their big money game, because we don't have money like that. Europe and America is broke. But what sets the U.S. apart has been the broader engagement where we serve as a moral authority on human rights, democracy, and governance. They're busy killing our black brothers and sisters in the US, and yet they're the moral authority in Africa. As who? You know, this is the stuff that is just so brainwashing. And I wish that our African presidents would actually stand up to Trump and say, yo, if you want to invest in Africa, first of all, make sure that the majority of the Americans that are coming to work in Africa are African Americans. Because the same racism that the African Americans, the same racism that the white Americans display in their country is the same racism and superiority that they bring to Africa. These are some of the things we should start saying. We're changing. We should start saying, yo, if you want to bring aid, bring it with our African American brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? But we'll see what happens. Nothing is ever for us. Nothing. It's always for them. And so, you know, as we must realize that we are the fastest growing nations, we're the fastest growing economies. A lot of the economies of these people are actually collapsing. What do we need $60 billion for when we have trillions of dollars of natural resources? That's why we need to get rid of some of these leaders. Anyway, I'll be keeping an eye out on this American strategy. May the Most High bless and keep you.
Wake up!